When we last were talking about the New Kingdom, if you recall, we were in the 18th dynasty. Okay, we talked about Ahmose and Amenhotep and those, but we're going to pick up today, really with Thutmose the First, but spend more time on his descendants. Now the story's going to get a wee bit complicated here, so hang with me. And if you have any questions, of course, just let me know in an email or in the comments or something. Okay, so we have Thutmose the First over here. Sometimes you'll see it Mose, sometimes you'll see it Moses, sometimes you'll see it SIS. It's hieroglyphics. How it gets transliterated changes. But Thutmose has a problem. When he dies, he does not have any sons from his primary wife. Now, pharaohs have lots of different women in their lives. They have a whole range of concubines. Then they have a series of wives. They are polygamous. The rest of Egypt, interestingly enough, generally not. But the pharaohs have almost a harem of wives. But there's one main wife. There's one queen. And that's who's really supposed to have the children that inherit the throne. Because remember, I told you that this concept, especially in the New Kingdom, of the most royal blood, that you want to marry the woman who's going to give you the child with the most royal blood. And so obviously the queen is going to be the most royal. Well, Thutmose's problem is that he and his queen only have one child, a daughter named Hatshepsut. Okay? But he does have a son from one of his lesser wives. And so in order to bolster the claim of that son, to make it a more legitimate claim since he's from a secondary wife, he is going to have his son, Thutmose II, okay, marry his daughter, Hatshepsut. So they are half siblings, half brother and half sister. Again, not something you see in the rest of Egypt. Very common to see this in the royal family. And so Hatshepsut will be married to Thutmose II. Hatshepsut and Thutmose II are married for about 20 years. She's only maybe 12 or 13 when she gets married. But they only have a daughter. Okay? Thutmose II has a son with another wife. So we're kind of seeing a pattern here. A lot of people suspect that some of the challenges that we're having with children in these dynasties is all of this inbreeding. It's not particularly good for the genetic code. But this time, because Hatshepsut's daughter will die as a teenager, okay? So when her husband, Thutmose II, dies, his son, Thutmose III, is the next in line. So far, everything's pretty normal for Egypt. Because Thutmose III is still a child, Hatshepsut is going to step in and serve as his regent. Oh, not what I wanted to do. Thought I could maybe add a little note there. So she's going, ooh, let's see if I can write with my touchscreen. So she's going to be the regent. This would be easier with a mouse and not a touchpad, but you know. Regent. Da da da. Look at me, guys. There. She's going to serve as the regent for Thutmose III. Now, again, this is really common across multiple cultures where when a child takes office, we don't trust little kids to run things. And so you will appoint either a regent, a single person, or a regency council to run things until that child comes to a reasonable age. And a lot of times it's actually the mother, already within the family, less likely to try and seize power, you know. And so Hatshepsut will step in as his regent. It's what happens next that makes things different for Egypt. How then do you go from being the wife of a pharaoh, the stepmother of a pharaoh, to taking over? Because we know Hatshepsut is the most prominent female pharaoh of Egypt. There are some others that might have been female pharaohs for brief amounts of time or in some of the more troubled times. But Hatshepsut definitively has a long, successful reign in Egypt. How do we get there? Well, as the wife of Tutmosis II, she is the god's wife of Amun, that very high-ranking title we talked about being rather new in the New Kingdom of Egypt. So, powerful woman. And she's now the regent of her stepson. What appears to happen is that sometime during her regency, she decides that she doesn't really want to be regent anymore. She, in fact, wants to be the pharaoh. Okay? And so, in order to establish the legitimacy of that concept, she's going to do multiple things. One, she's going to basically begin this storyline, and when an Egyptian begins a storyline, it's carved in stone somewhere, of Amun picking her. So you can see this is one particular instance. This is the god Amun. He is blessing Hatshepsut as the next pharaoh of Egypt. And so there's also some indications that her father, she changes the texts to say that her father picked her, not her half-brother, to be the next leader of Egypt. So she changes that narrative. But she's also even going to change the concept of her father. Remember, pharaohs are supposed to be the sons of Ra, and Amun-Ra. Remember, it's a syncretism there. So the sons of Ra. So she's going to propagate this storyline, we've got a little bit here, that Amun came to her mother, Hatshepsut's mother, okay, looking like the king of Egypt. Now this has got some Greek echoes later on that some of you might recognize. Found her asleep, awakens her with a divine fragrance, and goes to her immediately. He is aroused by her. He imposes his desire upon her. And then he lets her see that he is in fact Amun, and not just the pharaoh. And his love passed into her body. And the idea is that her father, Tutmosis I, is not actually her father, but Amun is actually her father. And so she has the royal mother. She is the daughter of Ra. Maybe not the son of Ra, but the daughter of Ra. So we've got that. And then there's some evidence that she might also have married that one daughter that she and Tutmosis II had to her stepson. It's a little bit unclear. There's some things that make it look like that, but then she's never attested as one of his great wives, and she would have been a great wife. So it's a little bit unclear. A lot is right here, because you can tell she's changing storylines. She is altering history to match the narrative that she wants. And it works. This is a carving early in her reign, and you've got two pharaonic figures, both wearing the pharaonic kilt, both wearing the crowns, both carrying the staffs, all the same imagery. One is Hatshepsut, one is Tutmosis III. So instead of serving as his regent, she is showing up as his equal, if not superior, by being in front of him in the inscriptions. Another fascinating thing about the rule of Hatshepsut is going to be a visual strategy that she employs. Early on obviously when she's queen, she's portrayed as a female. Early in her reign, even as pharaoh, she's portrayed as a female. You can see a statue of Hatshepsut here. She's wearing the pharaonic headdress, but she very clearly still has a female figure. She has breasts, her waist tucks in. She's portrayed as a woman. This statue is also Hatshepsut, much more masculine in appearance. We've got the little fake beard that all of the pharaohs wore. Her figure is gone. Even the face has much more masculine characteristics. And this is going to be true in general of Hatshepsut. Her imagery will turn towards the masculine. Her pronouns get kind of mixed up. Sometimes it's she, sometimes it's he. And a lot of times people have claimed like the first known cross-dresser or transgender or things of this nature. And while there certainly are instances of that sort of thing in the ancient world, I don't think that's what's going on here, because she doesn't consistently change her pronouns. She doesn't change her name to a masculine name. She keeps her name. She is the daughter of a pharaoh and the wife of a pharaoh. People aren't confused as to who she is. They know she's a woman. What it appears to be is that she doesn't want to be queen of Egypt. She wants to be king. And that's frankly a different job. Okay, in our modern world, we've kind of taken this idea of queens and kings are equivalent positions, and it just is a title depending on who's in power. But that's just not true in the past. In the Egyptian world, the queen had one set of tasks that she was responsible for, and the king had another. In fact, for years, Hatshepsut will have her daughter perform all the queen's activities, because a female has to do those. Now, you might be wondering, the passage over here, clearly not at all related to Egyptian history, but it's a passage from a book that I read growing up. It's called Dealing with Dragons. It's a kid's book that I loved. But there's a passage that really strikes me because it has the same question. The dragon that is the dragon you're dealing with has just won the contest to be the new king of the dragons. And the princess that works for her, basically, you'd understand if you read the story. But the princess says, but you're a female. You'd have to be a queen of the dragons. And the dragon's like, of course not. Queen's a totally different job. I don't want that one. I think the position's been vacant. But the king is a male dragon. Yes, but that has nothing to do with it. King is the name of the job. It doesn't matter who holds it. I think that concept is basically what Hatshepsut's going for. She doesn't want to be queen, so she's not going to represent herself as queen. She's going to sculpt herself. Remember, Egypt has this long tradition of artistic sameness. This is what pharaohs look like, and she wants to be the pharaoh. Now let's look at the reign of Hatshepsut. She's very, very successful in every way except perhaps militarily. She doesn't appear to have led any military expeditions, certainly defended the country, but nothing exterior to Egypt, which really isn't particularly shocking. I imagine the Egyptian military would have found it hard to follow a female commander. But the economy is sound, defense is sound, artistic and cultural advances are being made. She goes on a massive building campaign, including several obelisks. You see the obelisk here. Beautiful, beautiful pieces of art obelisks are, but so difficult. They tend to be a single piece of stone, and the one on the slide here is 90 feet high. So you can imagine the difficulty in quarrying that as one solid piece, transporting the piece to where you want it, carving it, getting it set up right without falling over. So beautiful, beautiful pieces. She builds this amazing mortuary complex, Deir al-Bahri, also shown on the slide here. Some people say it's the most beautiful thing built in Egypt. And it's right near Mentuhotep, remember the reuniter of the two lands and after the first intermediate period. So linking that with power, the wealth to build something of this level. She's going to send an expedition to a place called Punt, which we will look at on the next slide. But again, very expensive, very audacious to try and do something like that. There's also kind of a weird little aside in her reign that I figured I'd go ahead and talk about because almost everybody does. And that's the presence of a figure named Senenmut. Okay. Once her husband dies, once Tutmosis II has died, she's not allowed to remarry. The widow of the king cannot remarry. It's not terribly unusual, but she can't remarry. But they were married for probably about 20 years. And if you recall, she was probably in the neighborhood of 12 years old when they got married. So we're looking at a woman in her early 30s who is powerful, but doesn't have a lot going on in her personal life. And yet we see statue after statue after statue of this figure named Senenmut. Now, Senenmut had multiple titles, very powerful man, but one of those titles was to be the tutor of her daughter, okay, her only child. And a lot of his statues are shown with her. You've got this kind of slightly weird one with the hieroglyphs and the baby's head popping out. But this one is one of my very favorite Egyptian sculptures. Just the tenderness with which he sits there with this little girl on his lap. I don't know if you can tell in the picture, but she even has a little tiny fake pharaoh beard. That pharaonic power of the family, even amongst the women. There's a lot of people that speculate that Senenmut was Hatshepsut's lover. All the statues, all the power he was given. He's given a tomb very, very near to hers. We don't have evidence on that, but there's definitely a close relationship for a significant portion of her life with Senenmut. The expedition to Punt is also fascinating because it gives us our first real picture of what sub-Saharan Africa was like. The expedition goes down for trading. You can see here the Queen of Punt. Okay. Obviously, she looks significantly different than the rest of the figures. We think that she had a disease called elephantitis. Elephantitis causes extreme swelling and then thickening of the skin in certain limbs. And so it appears that possibly both of her legs and even maybe her arms, or at least part of her arms, had elephantitis. And so we see some medical things we didn't know before. We can tell the kinds of things they traded. We think probably this is around the area of Eritrea, just because really of what they're bringing back. We've got monkeys and giraffes and frankincense and myrrh, and not just the products of trees, but I don't know if you can tell this is in a basket. Whole trees. She wants to kind of recreate Punt. As far as we know, Hatshepsut's the first person to have a zoo. And so this is a very successful but very ambitious expedition. When Hatshepsut dies, something interesting is going to happen, and it made certainly understanding her life very difficult. Her presence, her existence, is eradicated in many places. You can see here, and obviously this is not the natural wearing of time. The rest of the inscription is fine. The figure of Hatshepsut has been chiseled out. Over here, the names of Hatshepsut have been chiseled out. And for a long time, we used to think that this was a symptom of her son's anger. That when he finally gets to take over, he's so mad at his mom that he destroys the written record of her. In fact, Champollion, when he found Deir el-Bahari, was very confused about all the references to Her Majesty, to a female name next to pharaonic symbols. He thought he was mistranslating things. But more recent scholarship seems to indicate that a lot of this destruction didn't happen until probably 20 years into the reign of Thutmose III. And it's really only the public facing. Obviously, that obelisk is still standing. Right? And a lot of the pieces inside Deir el-Bahari, the ones you wouldn't normally see, were not desecrated. The statues I've showed you before were not desecrated. So more recent scholarship is starting to wonder about the concept that maybe it wasn't so much that Thutmose III was so angry at his mom. If you're that angry, why wait 20 years to destroy her record? Remember, without her name, her ka is going to have trouble figuring out where to go. But that maybe it was more as his reign was established and as he's looking to pass the reign down to his son, that he wants a more clear-cut lineage. So it goes from his grandfather to his father to him to his son, without this kind of weird aberration off to his aunt stepmother. So that's one of the possibilities that we see in why Hatshepsut was removed from Egyptian narrative.